I never thought the final chapter of my life would begin with a cardboard box filled with old photographs and a heart weighed down by memories. I always believed aging would be a gentle descent, a quiet slowing down, surrounded by the warmth of family. I imagined grandchildren tugging at my sleeves, my son checking in on me, and evenings spent on the porch with Margaret as the sun dipped low behind the old willow tree. But life has a way of twisting the stories we write for ourselves, and sometimes it does so without mercy. My name is Harrison. I served in the American police force for 35 years. I wasn't perfect, but I was committed. I wasn't the strongest man, nor the fastest, nor the bravest, but I was dependable. When someone dialed 911 on a cold night, I arrived. When a mother screamed for help, I ran toward her voice. When evil reared its head, I stood in its way, not because I was fearless, but because someone had to. That was the oath I took, and that was the promise I kept. But in all my years of service, I never learned how to defend myself from the people I loved the most. I grew up in a neighborhood where sidewalks cracked like broken promises. My father passed when I was 7, an accident in a rusted steel mill that swallowed him whole. My mother, God bless her, worked herself to the bone just to keep us afloat. She would come home each night exhausted, shoulders drooping, but her voice always carried strength. She would gently brush my hair aside and say the same sentence every night. Never abandon your responsibilities, Harrison. Not ever. That sentence shaped me like no school or sermon ever could. With no father, I became the man of the house too early. By 15, I was mowing lawns, carrying groceries, and patching neighbors' fences, not because I wanted pocket money, but because work gave me purpose. When I turned 21, I walked into the police academy with a heartbeat full of resolve. I wasn't chasing glory or a uniform. I was chasing the chance to be the man my father never got to become. The academy was brutal. Early mornings, late nights, blistered feet, bruised ribs, and the suffocating pressure of discipline. But I pushed through. Every time I wanted to quit, I heard my mother's voice repeating that sentence like a sacred vow. Never abandon your responsibilities. And so, I didn't. I graduated, badge in hand, with a fire inside me that I thought would burn forever. My first years on the force felt like stepping into a world balanced on the edge of chaos. Some nights were quiet, too quiet. Other nights were a whirlwind of sirens, broken glass, and desperate cries. I learned quickly that people didn't call the police because they were having a good day. They called because something had gone wrong, badly wrong, and they needed someone to show up. I showed up. I stood between husbands and wives and kitchens littered with shattered plates. I stopped fights between frightened teenagers who thought anger was the only language they knew. I delivered terrible news on doorsteps, news that bent mothers to their knees and hollowed fathers into silence. I held dying strangers who clutched my arm as if I could pull them back from the darkness. You don't forget those faces. They stay with you like ghosts, whispering in the quiet hours of the night. But despite everything, I held on because I believed in the work. And somewhere between the chaos and the routine, I met Margaret. She walked into my life quietly, like a gentle breeze slipping through an open window. I met her at a small community fundraiser, one of those casual neighborhood gatherings with paper tablecloths, lukewarm coffee, and a raffle no one expected to win. She was volunteering at the dessert table, arranging cupcakes with a concentration that made me smile. When she looked up and caught me staring, she laughed softly. That laugh alone could melt the ice off Alaska. Margaret was calm where I was restless, soft where I was hardened by the job. We talked for hours that day, and when I walked her home, I knew I wanted her in every chapter of my life. We married 2 years later. Our first home was small, a one-story cottage with peeling paint, creaky floors, and a backyard that looked more like a jungle than a garden. But to us, it was paradise. We painted the walls ourselves, her choosing calm colors like sage green, while I insisted on at least one wall being navy blue. She won, of course. She always won our small debates. But she did it with such grace that losing never felt like losing. Together we planted flowers in the yard each spring. Lavender, daisies, roses, and Margaret's favorite, yellow tulips. Every morning before work, I would see her bending over the flower beds, hands gentle, movements slow and loving. Those sights softened me after nights filled with emergencies. When our son Michael was born, I felt like life had finally given me a gift that outweighed all the pain I had witnessed. I held that tiny boy in my arms and made him a promise I intended to keep until the day I died. He would never feel abandoned, never feel forgotten, never grow up without love. I worked double shifts, triple shifts even, just to give him everything I never had. I wanted him to attend good schools, live in a safe neighborhood, and walk through life knowing his father always had his back. Perhaps that was my first mistake. Maybe loving too hard blinds you. Maybe giving too much quiets the alarm bells you should be listening to. Maybe generosity, when received without gratitude, becomes a trap. But I didn't know that then. All I saw was my son, my pride, my legacy, my reason for pushing through exhaustion year after year. Michael grew into a bright young man, sharp, creative, charming. But he was also easily influenced by trends, by friends, by the allure of appearing wealthier than he truly was. He wanted nice things. Not just nice, expensive. And when he met Jessica, everything changed. Jessica was beautiful. A smile that could convince you of anything, a tone that always hinted at wanting more, and a taste so refined it bordered on impossible. She wasn't unkind at first, but she liked a lifestyle that didn't match their income. Designer handbags, constant upgrades, weekend trips, and the latest phones. Michael tried to keep up. When he couldn't, he turned to me. It started small. "Dad, can I borrow $200 just for this month?" "Dad, the car needs repairs. I'll pay you back soon." "Dad, Jessica really wants this furniture set." I gave without hesitation. He was my son. That's what fathers do, right? They step in when needed. But I didn't realize how often he was stepping in. Margaret warned me. She always had a sharp intuition when it came to character. "Harrison," she said one night while folding laundry, "you're giving too much. He has to learn to live within his means." I smiled and kissed her forehead. "He's just trying to build a life, sweetheart. Besides, he'll pay me back." Margaret didn't argue. She rarely did. But her silence spoke more than words could. The years caught up with me faster than I expected. My knees deteriorated. My reaction time slowed. My partner, 20 years younger than me, would glance at me with concern during foot pursuits. One day, after a particularly rough chase, my chief sat me down. "Harrison, you served this city well, but it's time." Retirement came like a quiet storm, unavoidable yet unnerving. Suddenly, mornings had no structure, no radio static, no dispatch calls, no adrenaline, just the ticking of the clock and the slow hum of loneliness. Margaret tried to ease the transition. She kept me busy with housework, small projects, long walks. We made breakfasts together, something we rarely had the chance to do when I was working. But beneath the surface of our new routine, something else was brewing. Margaret began to feel unwell. At first, fatigue, then pain, then dizziness that turned ordinary tasks into ordeals. The doctors were calm at first, tests, scans, appointments. But each visit added another stone to the growing pile of fear inside me. Her diagnosis arrived like a hammer, a chronic, aggressive illness. We fought it with everything we had, every savings account, every pension dollar, every ounce of hope. I sat beside her hospital bed for months, holding her hand, whispering old memories, praying silently even though I wasn't a religious man. She pressed my fingers once and said, "Harrison, whatever happens, don't give up on life. Promise me." I promised her. I lied, because when she passed away, something inside me broke so deeply that breathing felt like lifting a boulder. The house, our home, became unbearable. Every corner echoed her laugh. Every room held her scent. Every memory sharpened until it hurt to remember. And that was when Michael came to me. "Dad, it's not good for you to live alone," he said gently. Jessica nodded beside him. "You should come stay with us. For company. For stability." I mistook convenience for kindness. I mistook suggestion for love. I packed a few belongings, locked the door of the house Margaret and I built, and moved into my son's world, unaware that I was stepping into the slow unraveling of everything I had left. When I moved into Michael and Jessica's house, I entered with 2 suitcases, a folded American flag from my retirement ceremony, and a framed picture of Margaret holding baby Michael in her arms. I carried the frame like it was made of glass-thin hope. Michael led me to the guest room, small, clean, tucked away at the edge of the hallway. Jessica stood by the door with crossed arms, watching as I set my bags down. "It's temporary, of course," she said. Her voice was polite, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Temporary. The word stung, though I wasn't sure why at the time. Michael clapped my shoulder. "Dad, we're glad you're here. You'll feel better with us around." I nodded and whispered, "Thank you." But as I unpacked, I felt a strange pressure in my chest, a whisper of unease I ignored. For the first couple weeks, they acted gracious. Jessica served dinners, small portions, barely seasoned, nothing like Margaret's meals. Michael tried making small talk about investments, new phone models, and business ideas he had no clear plan for. I forced smiles, forced laughter, forced belonging. I tried to stay out of their way. I woke early, cleaned after myself, and spent long hours walking around the neighborhood. Retired life felt heavier without Margaret's presence. Her absence was a wound I carried like a dark bruise. Every night I sat in my guest room, holding her photo frame in both hands. "Margaret," I whispered, "I'm trying." But trying didn't make things better.
Slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice at first, Jessica began reshaping the house around my presence, or rather, removing my presence.
One afternoon, I walked into the living room where I had placed a couple of framed photos. One of Margaret and me on our 30th anniversary, and one of Michael as a child on his first day of school. Jessica stood by the shelf, holding the frames. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Oh, just organizing," she said. "These don't really fit the decor here." Before I could reply, she slipped them into a cardboard box on the floor, carelessly, like tossing old magazines. I swallowed. "They mean a lot to me." "I know," she said, brushing imaginary dust from her blouse. "But the living room needs a more modern aesthetic." I stared at the box. "Can I keep them in my room at least?" She shrugged. "Sure, as long as they don't clutter the hallway." It wasn't about photos. It was about erasing space, erasing presence, erasing me. Because when she passed away, something inside me broke so deeply that breathing felt like lifting a boulder. The house, our home, became unbearable. Every corner echoed her laugh. Every room held her scent. Every memory sharpened until it hurt to remember. And that was when Michael came to me. "Dad, it's not good for you to live alone," he said gently. Jessica nodded beside him. "You should come stay with us, for company, for stability." I mistook convenience for kindness. I mistook suggestion for love. I packed a few belongings, locked the door of the house Margaret and I built, and moved into my son's world, unaware that I was stepping into the slow unraveling of everything I had left. When I moved into Michael and Jessica's house, I entered with 2 suitcases, a folded American flag from my retirement ceremony, and a framed picture of Margaret holding baby Michael in her arms. I carried the frame like it was made of glass-thin hope. Michael led me to the guest room, small, clean, tucked away at the edge of the hallway. Jessica stood by the door with crossed arms, watching as I set my bags down. "It's temporary, of course," she said. Her voice was polite, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Temporary. The word stung, though I wasn't sure why at the time. Michael clapped my shoulder. "Dad, we're glad you're here. You'll feel better with us around." I nodded and whispered, "Thank you." But as I unpacked, I felt a strange pressure in my chest, a whisper of unease I ignored. For the first couple weeks, they acted gracious. Jessica served dinners, small portions, barely seasoned, nothing like Margaret's meals. Michael tried making small talk about investments, new phone models, and business ideas he had no clear plan for. I forced smiles, forced laughter, forced belonging. I tried to stay out of their way. I woke early, cleaned after myself, and spent long hours walking around the neighborhood. Retired life felt heavier without Margaret's presence. Her absence was a wound I carried like a dark bruise. Every night I sat in my guest room holding her photo frame in both hands. "Margaret," I whispered, "I'm trying." But trying didn't make things better. Slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice at first, Jessica began reshaping the house around my presence, or rather removing my presence. One afternoon, I walked into the living room where I had placed a couple of framed photos, one of Margaret and me on our 30th anniversary, and one of Michael as a child on his first day of school. Jessica stood by the shelf, holding the frames. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Oh, just organizing," she said. "These don't really fit the decor here." Before I could reply, she slipped them into a cardboard box on the floor, carelessly, like tossing old magazines. I swallowed. They mean a lot to me. I know, she said, brushing imaginary dust from her blouse. But the living room needs a more modern aesthetic. I stared at the box. Can I keep them in my room at least? She shrugged. Sure, as long as they don't clutter the hallway. It wasn't about photos. It was about erasing space, erasing presence, erasing me. That was the first sign I missed. The house began shifting in ways only someone who lived there every day would notice. The dining table had 3 chairs, but Jessica started setting only 2. When they watched movies, the couch suddenly felt too small. When they had conversations, they talked over me, around me, as if I wasn't there. I offered to help around the house. Jessica, I can do laundry. No, you'll ruin the cycle setting. I can mow the lawn. No, the landscaping company comes tomorrow. I can cook dinner. It's okay, Harrison. We already ate. Each no was a brick slowly building a wall. Michael rarely stepped in. He always had excuses. I'm busy, Dad. Jessica's just stressed. Don't take it personally. But how could I not? I began to feel like a shadow in my own son's home. One evening, while waiting for Michael to return from work, I overheard a conversation from the kitchen. Jessica's voice cut sharply through the walls. Your father is costing us money, Michael. Groceries, utilities, everything has gone up. It's temporary, he murmured. Temporary? She snapped. We can't afford this. If we're going to start that business, we need every resource we can get. There was a tense silence. Then Jessica said something that made my blood run cold. Why don't you talk to him about the house? My house. The house Margaret and I built. I froze where I stood. Michael's voice was faint. Jess, I don't know. She lowered her tone, but her words were sharp enough for me to catch. He won't need it forever, and the money could secure our future. My knees weakened. My hands trembled. And for the first time, I felt a crack in the foundation of the bond I had with my son. I stepped away quietly before they noticed me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The photo frame felt heavier than usual. Margaret's smile seemed like a reminder of everything that was slipping away. A week later, Michael knocked gently on my door. Dad, you got a minute? I looked up from the book I wasn't reading. Of course, son. He entered with a stack of documents in his hand. Jessica and I are refinancing the house, he said. There's some paperwork that requires your signature, just a formality. Your name appears on something from years ago, nothing major. I trusted my son. That was my second mistake. I didn't put on my reading glasses. That was my third. I skimmed the first page, words blurring, legal terms swirling. Is this really necessary? I asked. Yeah, he said quickly, eyes avoiding mine. Just procedural stuff. Without thinking further, I signed. He thanked me and rushed out. Later that night, I wondered, why was he in such a hurry? But I convinced myself I was overthinking. 3 months later, a letter arrived from the county office. At first, I thought it was just another pension notice, but the envelope felt too stiff, too official. Inside was a document stating the ownership of my home had been transferred to Michael and Jessica. My breath stopped. My vision blurred at the edges. It felt like my heart forgot how to beat. I stumbled into the living room, the paper shaking violently in my hands. Michael, I said, voice breaking. What is this? He glanced once, then looked away. Dad, it's still in the family. My legs nearly gave out. "You took my house," I whispered. Jessica stepped forward with arms crossed.
"It's not a big deal, Harrison. You weren't using it. It's better this way."
"Better for who?" I asked, my voice raw. Neither of them answered. I walked back to my room, closed the door, and sank onto the bed. I pressed my forehead against Margaret's photo and cried for the first time in years. Not because of the house, but because of the betrayal. After that day, everything changed. They stopped pretending, stopped masking their irritation, stopped hiding their intentions. Jessica complained more openly.
"This grocery bill is ridiculous. We shouldn't have to pay for your medication. We can't afford extra expenses."
I offered to pay for my own needs.
"Oh, that won't help," she snapped. "The bills are still higher because you're here."
I cooked meals. They refused to eat them. I cleaned. Jessica said I made things worse. I stayed in my room. She accused me of not contributing. Michael? He watched silently, as if trapped between loyalty and convenience. But silence is its own betrayal. One night I heard him whisper,
"Jess, maybe we're being too hard on him."
She scoffed.
"He'll survive. He's old, not stupid."
Something inside me shattered quietly. It was a Sunday morning. The sun was warm, the house peaceful, the kind of morning that should have been comforting. I brewed a cup of coffee, black, the way Margaret liked it, though she never finished a full cup. I sat at the small table in the guest room, flipping through old photographs, letting nostalgia carry me like a gentle tide. Then came a knock. Jessica stood at the door.
"We need to talk."
Michael appeared behind her, expression blank, eyes distant. Jessica crossed her arms.
"You need to pack your things."
The words didn't register at first. "Pack my things?" I repeated softly. Michael wouldn't look at me.
"Dad, we need space. Things are cramped. It's better if you stay somewhere else."
Better for them, never for me. I felt numb, completely, painfully numb. "If that's what you want," I whispered. Jessica stepped aside, pointing toward my open suitcases as if she had been waiting for this moment. I packed silently. Every shirt folded with trembling hands, every picture frame wrapped like fragile bone. Jessica stood by the front door, impatient. When I was ready, she opened it wide. No goodbye, no hug, no thank you. Just cold air and a colder silence. Michael walked me to the step only because I asked him to.
"Take care, Dad,"
he said, barely above a whisper. My voice cracked.
"Why, son?"
He didn't answer. I stepped outside. The door closed behind me. And for the first time in my life, I understood what true loneliness felt like. I found a small room for rent, cheap, quiet, barely furnished. The landlord didn't ask questions and I didn't offer answers. At night I sat alone and replayed everything. Every sacrifice, every dollar loaned, every shift I worked instead of spending time with my family, every moment I gave Michael when he needed me. And I asked myself one question again and again. Where did I go wrong? But the truth came slowly. Sometimes love blinds you. Sometimes giving everything turns you into an empty well. Sometimes the people you raise grow into strangers. But pain can either destroy you or rebuild you. And I chose to rebuild. The room I rented sat above an old hardware store on the edge of town. The building leaned a little, like years of storms had pushed it slightly off-center. The walls were scratched, the carpet worn thin, and the window stuck halfway when I tried to open it. But it was mine. For the first time in months, I had a space where no one sighed when I entered the room. No one moved my belongings. No one rationed my presence like a burden too heavy to carry. Still, the first night felt heavier than the rest. The room was quiet, too quiet. Loneliness echoed through the walls like a faint hum, a sound you hear only when you pause long enough to listen. I placed Margaret's photo on the nightstand, sat on the creaking bed, and whispered, "I'm trying, love. I hope that's enough." But I didn't feel like enough. Not yet. It's a strange thing, betrayal. It doesn't hit you all at once. It isn't a single, sharp pain. It's a slow thawing of truth, a gradual cracking of the heart, until one day the whole structure collapses. Every morning, as I made instant coffee on the old electric kettle, the same question haunted me. How did my own son abandon me? I replayed every memory of Michael growing up, his first steps, his first day of school, the night he fell off his bike and I carried him home, the time I worked a double shift so he could go on his school trip, his graduation speech where he said, "My dad is my hero." And now, I was not his hero. I was an inconvenience. When I walked down the street that first week alone, I realized how small I had become. I kept my head down. I avoided eye contact. I moved slowly, not because my body demanded it, but because my spirit did. One evening, after 2 days of barely eating, I walked into a local convenience store to buy a carton of milk and some bread. I stood in line behind a mother and her little daughter, maybe 4 years old. The girl held a tiny blue balloon. Suddenly, the balloon slipped from her fingers and floated up toward the ceiling. She gasped, eyes wide, ready to cry. I reached up, slow, steady, and caught the string just before it was out of reach. When I handed it back to her, her smile lit up the whole aisle. "Thank you," she chirped. Her mother smiled too. "You have quick reflexes," she said. I chuckled. Old habits. And in that tiny moment, something inside me stirred, the faintest spark of purpose. Maybe my life wasn't done. Maybe I still had something to give. A week later, I passed a small community center. A banner hung crookedly across the entrance. Volunteers needed. Seniors, veterans, all welcome. I stood there staring at the sign for several minutes. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I was searching for something. A reason to wake up. A place where my presence didn't cause tension. A space where I was wanted, not tolerated. I decided to walk inside. The lobby smelled like old books and lemon cleaner. A group of seniors sat around a table playing cards. A poster board displayed announcements. Yoga classes, cooking workshops, counseling groups. A woman behind the reception desk looked up. "Hello, first time here?" she asked warmly. "Yes," I said. "I'm Harrison." "I'm Linda," she replied. "We're always looking for volunteers. Do you have any experience working with people?" I nearly laughed. Experience? I spent 35 years helping strangers through the worst moments of their lives. I had experience in abundance. "I was a police officer," I said gently. Her eyes brightened. "Oh, we could really use help with safety workshops, senior support groups, and our evening mentorship program for at-risk teens." Her enthusiasm felt like a warm blanket over a cold soul.
"If you're willing," she added, "we'd love to have you."
I nodded. I'm willing. And for the first time since losing Margaret and Michael, I felt a heartbeat of purpose. The first group I helped with was the Senior Support Circle, a small room, 10 chairs, a pot of lukewarm coffee, a box of tissues in the center. The stories I heard that day opened my eyes. An older woman named Ruth had been kicked out of her daughter's home after she refused to sign over her savings. A retired truck driver named Gerald was living in his car because his family sold his mobile home without telling him. A grandmother named Patricia hadn't spoken to her son in 8 years because he told her she was too expensive to keep around. I sat there in silence, absorbing every word, every sob, every tremble in their voices. I wasn't alone, not by a long shot. When it was my turn to speak, I hesitated, but the words came out anyway. "My son asked me to leave," I said quietly, "and before that, he took the house my wife and I built." The room fell silent. Ruth placed her hand over mine. Patricia squeezed my shoulder. Gerald shook his head slowly. "Kids these days," he muttered, "they don't appreciate what was sacrificed for them." For the first time in months, I didn't cry. I felt seen. I felt understood. Volunteering gave me a structure I didn't realize I needed. Maybe I was searching for something, a reason to wake up, a place where my presence didn't cause tension, a space where I was wanted, not tolerated.